Who would have thought his former mortal enemy, the Sky Blue Saintess, would actually be begging Han Li to save them? So, what exactly happened? This is what happened inside the trapped Fog Mountain. After the mid-stage Han Li killed Gong Mo, everyone tried to escape through the teleportation array. But they never expected Saint Ancestor Yansha, whose power is comparable to a deity transformation cultivator, to activate the spatial divine ability of the Black Wine Flag, resealing this small pocket of space, and trapping everyone inside once again. At Han Li's suggestion, they teamed up with their former enemies once more, to break through the spatial barrier with brute force, in an attempt to escape. Taoist Han, I recall you have a hidden companion by your side, a fellow cultivator who doesn't show themselves. Why not ask them to come out and help? That cultivator's flying knives are clearly quite powerful. After just a few words of discussion, the young man, surnamed Su, suddenly said to Han Li with a straight face. The silver-red Yaksha and the others also reacted, all looking towards Han Li at the same time. Inwardly, Han Li was cursing this young man Su nonstop, but on the surface, his expression remained normal. After a moment of thought, he replied, "There's no need to call them out. Due to their cultivation technique, it's inconvenient for them to appear before you all." Hearing Han Li say this, the young man surnamed Su showed a look of displeasure, but having just seen the strange divine ability Han Li used to kill that two-headed Gumo, he didn't dare to force the issue. He could only give a cold snort and drop it. Nearby, the For Transformation's true man, ever since agreeing to team up, had been wearing a wide grin. At this moment, seeing Han Li and the group with the young man surnamed Su, seemingly at odds with each other, a cold glint flashed silently in his pupils. Just then, his expression suddenly changed slightly, then it immediately returned to normal. He then slowly lowered his head, making his face unclear, as if he were deep in thought. But in reality, Sanzan Ren's lips were moving nonstop, as he was secretly sending a voice transmission to someone present. A moment later, he raised his hand again. This time, his face was covered with a beaming smile. However, no one noticed that on the hand he held behind his back, on the back of his palm, at some unknown time, dense, several inch-long white hairs had sprouted. Each one was as hard as a needle. Zanzan Ren. The white hairs on his arm appeared for only an instant, then immediately retracted into his skin, vanishing without a trace. Then, as if nothing had happened, he and Han Li's group continued to discuss how to break through the tent. Han Li's expression was calm, and his voice was faint, but no one noticed him, as a wisp of his divine sense slipped into a certain spirit beast pouch, gently soothing the suddenly agitated soul-drawing beast. At the same time, thoughts were racing through his mind. In the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, Han Li and the others had worked out a plan of attack. As the group flickered into motion, they each selected a spot. Then they took out their respective formation flags and discs to set up an auxiliary magic formation that could increase the power of their attacks. Meanwhile, Han Li and the young man surnamed Su began setting up one called the Sealing Rock Dragon Formation, a major offensive array. Although this formation couldn't compare to the advanced, grand formations of some major sects, it was the most powerful offensive type formation that the group could set up on short notice. It was estimated that once this formation was complete and activated, its power would be equivalent to that of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, using an ordinary magic treasure to strike with full force. Naturally, it would be of great use. After a short while, all the formations had been set up. Gui Ling and Yin Chi Yi, Cha and the others also walked into the auxiliary formation. As for the Fingyan Dragon Formation, it was naturally presided over by Han Li and the young man surnamed Su. It was quite ironic, really. Han Li and the Heavenly Temple originally had a life-or-death relationship. In the blink of an eye, they were forced to join forces. The young man surnamed Su gazed at the area not far ahead, at the grayish barrier. With a flick of his hand, a milky white ball of light shot out. It struck the barrier. However, the ball of light didn't explode. Instead, after a slight pause, it hovered on the surface of the barrier, flickering on and off. It had become a very obvious target. In a moment, fellow Taoists attacked this point. The young man surnamed Su said this matter-of-factly. The others didn't say anything, naturally taking it as a tacit agreement. Seeing this, the young man surnamed Su immediately turned and glanced at Han Li, who was in the formation. He gave a slight nod. Han Li smiled faintly. Without another word, he formed a hand seal. His 10 fingers flicked out towards the surroundings. One after another, magical seals shot out. In an instant, the dozens of formation flags all around began to flash with various spiritual lights. A loud humming sound arose. The young man surnamed Su took a deep breath. A fiery red spiritual light appeared on his hand. He suddenly pressed it onto the ground. Instantly, waves of red light spread out from him as the center, activating some of the formation plates buried deep underground. The ground immediately began to tremble. Then, with a few whooshing sounds, more than 10 scarlet pillars of fire shot up into the sky from within the formation. Each one was as thick as the mouth of a bull, radiating scorching heat, as if it were igniting the very air around it. Everyone felt their mouths go dry. At this moment, Han Li flipped over his palm. A light cyan formation plate appeared in his palm. He casually slapped the formation plate. A faint light flashed on its surface. The formation immediately responded in kind. Suddenly, spakes of spiritual light emerged. After a few rumbles, over 10 hazy cyan wind flood dragons condensed and took form within the formation. Then, under Han Li's command, each one locked onto a pillar of fire and pounced on it. Instantly, wind and fire merged, transforming into over a dozen wind fire flood dragons, with wind as their bodies, and fire as their skin. The fire borrowed the wind's power, and the wind and fire grew together. In the blink of an eye, the wind fire flood dragons took shape. A flash of joy appeared on the young man surnamed Zhu's face as he stood up and shouted. Then, he opened his mouth, and spat out a hazy cyan pearl. The spirit rhino peacock circling above his head also flapped its wings. A 5-colored spiritual light surged out wildly, wrapping around the pearl and shooting straight for the staff wall. With an astonishing cry, Qi Yi, Zhao Lin, Yinping, and the others also activated their own auxiliary formations one after another. Some used their divine abilities, some sent out their magic treasures to attack. Following a certain profound sequence, they also attacked the front of that staff wall. A series of earth-shattering rumbles came from the staff wall. One massive ball of spiritual energy after another exploded. The sheer force of it seemed to make the entire space rumble along with it. Han Li flicked his sleeve. Dozens of golden flying swords shot into the sky, and immediately transformed into several hundred streaks of sword light. The blinding golden radiance nearly blotted out the entire sky. The nearby young man surnamed Su and the other cultivators saw this display of power, and recalling the sharpness of the original azure bamboo wind cloud swords, their expressions all changed slightly. Their fear of Han Li couldn't help but deepen. But Han Li didn't care at all what the others were thinking. Under his incantation, these sword lights instantly condensed into a sword over 100 feet long. He cast an incantation upon it. A layer of golden electric arcs appeared on the sword's body. A loud clap of thunder erupted. However, although the giant sword had formed, Han Li wasn't in a hurry to activate this treasure. Instead, he let out a sharp cry, and suddenly threw the formation plate in his hand. Then, forming a hand seal, he tapped the formation plate several times in quick succession. Instantly, the formation plate trembled in midair. Then, with a crisp sound, it shattered. A vast expanse of pure light shone down from above, and submerged into the formation array, disappearing in an instant. The four surrounding formation flags, after absorbing the pure light, erupted with astonishing spiritual light, causing the dozen or so beacon fire dragons flying above the array to tumble in the air. A dragon's roar came from all their mouths. Their bodies suddenly swelled to several times their original size, and bearing their fangs and claws, they pounced forward. The dozen or so beacon fire dragons carried an astonishing momentum, forming a straight line, and slammed into the barrier one after another. This time, the gray barrier finally began to tremble violently, and eventually started to twist and deform, when the last beacon fire dragon exploded against the barrier, transforming into a huge ball of beacon fire. A flash of blood-red light appeared. It transformed into iron blood blade, and slashed down at the same spot. With a bang, a crisp sound like shattering porcelain was heard. A crack, about 10 feet long, finally appeared on the barrier. It was only about a foot deep, and didn't seem to have penetrated all the way through. But just then, a black light flashed over the crack, and it looked as if it was about to seal itself. But the young man named Su, Yinchi Yi Cha, and the others, how could they let such a golden opportunity go to waste? Immediately, their numerous magical treasures, like a violent storm, relentlessly attacked the crack. This barely managed to provide a moment's respite. At this moment, Han Li made his move. The giant sword, which had long been gathering power, transformed into a bolt of golden lightning with a deafening roar, and viciously struck the crack. A golden arc of light exploded within the crack, as if a golden sun was rising inside it, causing the large crack to instantly melt and dissolve. It was forcefully expanded to several times its original size. The effect of this one attack seemed to be even greater than all the previous attacks combined, several times greater. In fact, not only were the others stunned, even Han Li himself was taken aback. What's going on? The way it just cut through was as if it was the evil warding divine lightning. It seemed to be the perfect counter to this barrier. Could it be that the black wine flag is actually a demonic spiritual treasure? If that's the case, then this situation isn't impossible. Just as Hanli was pondering this, the golden light faded, and a pale white light shone through the barrier. Inside the crack, it looked as if only a thin layer remained. Seeing this, everyone was overjoyed, but before the others could immediately activate their magic treasures to attack, a small, inch-long black flying dagger appeared silently, materializing in front of the crack. Then, it flashed and disappeared in an instant, but that final layer of the barrier immediately let out a soft pop. Immediately, the thin barrier showed a black gleam on its surface. Then, its entire body shattered inch by inch. A hole several meters wide appeared. Outside was a scene that was incredibly familiar to everyone. Seeing this, everyone was overjoyed, but with a flash of light, a figure had already bizarrely appeared in front of the barrier. Then, with a flash, it was the first to rush out of the hole. It was Han Li's humanoid puppet. This sudden move sent the others, who were still hesitating, into a panic. Without a second thought, everyone performed various escape techniques, all hoping to rush through the only exit. A pair of silver wings also appeared on Han Li's back, but he didn't immediately fly out with them. Instead, a strange glint flashed in his eyes, and after a moment, his lips moved slightly. Gui Ling had already transformed into a streak of black and white energy, and appeared before the barrier. But suddenly, a look of shock and suspicion appeared on her face, and her movements paused for a moment. And in that brief moment of delay, the youth surnamed Su and the other demons managed to escape the barrier a step ahead of her. Just then, outside the barrier, there was a sudden flash of an intensely dazzling, blood-red light. Countless black threads shot out, hissing through the air as they flashed past the opening. The thunderous roar of the youth surnamed Su and Gui Ling's sharp, furious cry rang out almost simultaneously. A loud explosion erupted outside the opening. A thick, bloody mist appeared, and within it, the triumphant voice of true Master Si-San could be heard. The voice trailed off. Hanli let out a sharp cry without hesitation. Then, the wind and thunder wings on his back flapped fiercely, and he transformed into a silver arc, shooting directly through the opening. Although Gui Ling was filled with shock and suspicion, she followed him out without a second thought. The moment Hanli's figure appeared outside the barrier, countless streams of blood energy immediately rushed towards him, from all directions. But he seemed to have been prepared. The silver arc flashed a few times, escaping the blood energy's reach. He reappeared over 100 yards away in another spot. He stopped and looked back towards the opening he had escaped from. What he saw made his eye twitch. Outside the rapidly shrinking opening, a forest had unexpectedly appeared. A vast sea of blood. The boundless blood mist was as thick as ink, and the stench of blood churned violently. And in the middle of the sea of blood, something was floating gently on its surface, and had not fallen into the bloody mist. It was the Lu Diaksha, Shaikinshu, and a creature covered in white fur. A tall and large monster. This monster was wearing the robes of a wandering immortal, but a foul, damp aura billowed from its body. With a sudden turn of its hand, green fire flickered in its eyes, and fangs protruded from its mouth. It was the shriveled, grotesque face of a white-furred bear. At this moment, the monster was controlling a blood blade, manifesting a bloody light, to pin a figure within the sea of blood, trapping him firmly within the blood flag, making it impossible for him to escape. Only half of this figure's body remained. An arm and a leg were gone, yet he was still desperately channeling a green orb and a silver hook-like magic treasure to resist the bloody light from above and the corrosive bloodshed from all sides. But his face was filled with a venomous look. He was actually the great immortal master of the Azure Prairie, that young man with the surname Su, and not far from him, that spirit rhinoceros peacock with considerable power, was trapped by the creature Shaikinshu had transformed into, also firmly pinned down, barely able to defend itself. Lin Yinping's situation wasn't any better. He was being overwhelmed by the countless, baleful soul threads released by the Lu Diaksha, scrambling in midair, if not for his powerful silver cicada, which could spray silver threads, that happened to be able to resist the pervasive attacks of the evil threads. He would have been captured long ago. But even so, his defeat was only a matter of time. Nearby, Gui Ling, who had also escaped thanks to Han Li's warning, who had also managed to get out, suddenly stared at the white-furred monster, and let out a cry of surprise. "What, you know this refined corpse?" Han Li said without turning his head. "I guess you could say that." After a moment of hesitation, Master Gui Ling, "What do you mean?" With a flicker in his eyes, Heinai turned his head back. Before he became a master refiner, he was also a spirit beast. Back then, he had some dealings with us. Its master was also a human who descended from the spirit realm to the human realm, a cultivator. But ever since we were sealed in Kunwu Mountain, we never saw him again. We also don't know how he became a master refiner. Guiling explained. So, you're saying his original form was also a spirit sword demon beast? Han Li's expression changed. That's right. Back then, the cultivators, who descended from the spirit realm to the human realm, couldn't have a cultivation level that was too high. The spirit beasts they brought with them were also greatly restricted, and the few of us who descended along with them had our original memories erased. Before we were allowed to come down, Guiling sighed. Your memories were erased. You don't remember anything at all. Han Li's heart sank, and he immediately felt a sense of disappointment. You see, he had originally wanted to ask Guiling about some matters concerning the spirit realm. Other than knowing that I came down from the spirit realm, I don't have a single memory of it. Guiling also showed a trace of melancholy. Han Li fell silent. But then, a thought crossed his mind. He thought of Yinyu. Yinyu's identity is far from simple. She should have some memories of the spirit realm, right? His mind started racing again. But he immediately pushed the matter to the back of his mind. Now was not the time to be thinking about these things. His gaze subconsciously swept across the area after coming out of the tent. This space had become a bit strange. It was completely empty everywhere, as if there wasn't a single person in sight. Not only had the balance pool that was originally floating above the palace disappeared without a trace, even that black wine flag that had been holding them in place had vanished without a trace. No wonder they broke free so easily. The ground was covered in huge, deep pits, and staff-length gouges and trenches, as if it had been clawed by some giant beast. A small half of the palace had also been completely smashed into ruins, looking as if it had gone through a brutal, fierce battle. Han Li's divine sense had already swept over the palace remains, but unfortunately, the isolating restriction spell set within was still intact. For the moment, he couldn't discover anything, but this also made him relax internally. After all, that Yuan Sha Sacred Clan member had put far too much pressure on him. If he had to face this demon head-on, he definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. But now, the only teleportation array had been isolated within the Black Wind Flag's restrictive space. To leave this place, he would have to find another way. With a glint in his eyes, Han Li began to ponder a strategy to escape. Fellow Taoist Han, if you are willing to help me and Brother Su, the conflict between you and our Sky Blue Sacred Palace, I, in my capacity as the Sacred Maiden, can take full responsibility. We can resolve the grudge between you and the Sky Blue Step right here and now. Just then, Lin Yinping suddenly shouted anxiously at Han Li, her voice filled with desperation. I've already been hunted by you two Wu people for so long. What grudge is there left to resolve? I have no interest in helping. Han Li's expression was indifferent, as he flatly refused. Han Li, don't forget, we only came to the Great Jin because of you. If Grandmother Su and I fall here, do you think the other three Grand Masters will let you off so easily? Hearing this, Han Li let out a dry laugh. He glanced over at the sea of blood. Lin Yinping was gripping a silk handkerchief in her hand, channeling power into it until it shone with a blinding fluorescent light. For a moment, he managed to push back the malevolent soul threads a little, but his face was abnormally pale. He had clearly begun using a secret technique that unleashes his latent potential. To boost the power of his magic treasure, the young man surnamed Su, having been ambushed first, and now trapped in a sea of blood, found that although the two magic treasures he controlled were powerful, they were now on the verge of collapse, looking like they could fail at any moment. Ironically, the one in the best situation was Zhoushen, his spirit Vesper peacock, shimmering with 5-colored spiritual light. Although this ancient spirit bird couldn't break free from this thing, the beast that cast it couldn't seem to do anything to it for the time being. After all, the beast's most powerful attack, the golden waves, happened to be countered by the 5-colored spiritual light. No matter how many golden waves were sent, they immediately disintegrated and vanished upon contact with the spiritual light. Fairy Lin, even if you make the most extravagant promises right now, I will not intervene. To be honest, if it didn't look like you two were doomed to fail, I might have even considered taking advantage of your situation. As for those three cultivators, if they really come looking for me, I, Han, wouldn't mind sparring with them a bit. Han Li's expression was calm, as he replied unhurriedly. He wasn't bluffing. After the battle, where he slew the one from the ancient tomb, Han Li now had a rough understanding of his own strength. With his humanoid puppet, and Guiling fighting with all its might, he could simultaneously take on 3, or 4 late-stage nascent soul cultivators, and not be at too much of a disadvantage. Besides, those 3 great cultivators from Sky Blue would likely not all leave the grasslands to come after him, unless they truly wanted to sever the destiny of their own people. After all, the Sky Blue grassland, without a great cultivator guarding it. If the Mulan people were to learn of this, I'm afraid the Kunwu people would face the calamity of annihilation in the blink of an eye. Being perfectly clear about this in his mind, Han Li was naturally unfazed by the Sky Blue Holy Maiden's threat. He didn't even give it a second glance. The white-haired cultivator, who had been a little worried, upon hearing this, his face immediately relaxed. A strange laugh escaped his lips. Fellow Taoist Han, you truly are a reasonable person. I never made a move against you, Brother Han. How could he fall for your petty tricks? You two should just surrender obediently. Han Li's face was expressionless, but inwardly, he let out a cold snort. Back in the tent, this so-called true Mansa Sang had used some unknown, secret technique to stealthily reveal a trace of his cultivator identity. But it was immediately discovered by the soul-lifting beast in the bag. After he came out, he naturally discovered this demon, and his telepathic communication with that silver-winged yaksha, relying on his own spiritual sense, which was even stronger than that of a late-nascent soul stage cultivator. He silently eavesdropped on a portion of their conversation. In order not to let these two discover his eavesdropping, he naturally didn't dare to forcefully intrude on their divine sense. He could only hear the general idea, but even this vague portion was enough to let him know that this white-haired cultivator was actually planning to team up with the silver-winged yaksha. After breaking through the tent wall, while everyone else was emotionally stirred up, and their vigilance was at its lowest, they would attack the human cultivators who had come out with them. An attack. As for whether these people were the Kunwu people or Han Li's group, it made no difference to them. Han Li had just deliberately delayed his exit by a step, which caused that young man named Su and Li Mingping's group to suffer a terrible fate. So, Han Li naturally had no kind feelings for the other party. Although he had never met this white-haired cultivator before, a demon cultivator with a late-nascent soul cultivation base, and this kind of appearance, it could only be that 10,000-year Lion King from Bending Waste Valley. It was long rumored that this demon, countless millennia ago, had already achieved spiritual form through cultivation. In the demon clan of the Great Jin, he's considered quite a famous figure, and when Yaogu, as a major power in the Great Jin, on par with the Tai sect and the Heavenly Devil sect. For this demon, a master of the old ways, to appear here disguised as a human rogue cultivator, is quite intriguing. And this Si Sanzan Ren that the demon is disguised as, I don't know if he was a real rogue cultivator, who was killed and then impersonated, or if he's simply an avatar this demon created, to walk among humans. The concealment technique this demon cultivates is truly profound and unusual. In recent years, he couldn't even see through his demonic identity. However, it seems, his cultivation level is also greatly restricted as a result. Otherwise, back when he used the blood-absorbing blade to ambush Elder Haishan of the Yinluo sect, he wouldn't have let his nascent soul escape so easily. Han Li watched the figure floating in the distant sea of blood, the 10,000-year demon lion, whose body reeked of a demonic aura, and pondered with a blank expression. Suddenly, a cold glint flashed through his eyes. Although he had no intention of saving his former adversary, he wouldn't let the other party successfully refine the blade with blood and devour the nascent soul. After it's refined with flesh and soul, the treasure's power would increase dramatically, and it would then turn around to deal with them. The moment the young man named Su is killed will be the moment he makes his move to seize the blood-absorbing blade. He figured that no matter how fast the blood-absorbing blade converted power, there would surely be a delay in the process, and that window of time would be his best chance to seize this treasure. An evil treasure like this, it's naturally much safer to have it in his own hands. Han Li had already made his cold decision. He thought to himself without showing any emotion. Han Li's lips moved slightly. Beside him, Gui Ling's gaze shifted, but his expression remained calm as usual. If you are willing to help, I will also gift you the secret of the golden insect, its final transformation into its mature form. Surely, this condition is enough to move you, right? A sullen and silent youth, surnamed Su, suddenly took a deep breath and shouted at Han Li he. The Shijin insect containing the pellet becomes. He walked with a strange look on his face. The method for the Shijin insect's final transformation into its mature form is a top secret of our sacred temple. How can we just reveal it to an outsider? When Lin Yinping heard this, he retorted with cold surprise. We're about to die. How can you still worry about some top secret? Do you really want to be devoured by this blood entity? Without even a chance for reincarnation. Besides, if we fall here, the Mulan people will take this chance to counterattack the grasslands. Compared to the fate of our entire clan, a mere secret art, is nothing at all? Before Lin Yinping could finish, the surnamed youth interrupted him with a livid face. When Lin Yinping heard this, his face turned as white as a sheet, but ultimately, he said no more. Seeing Han Li's face show hesitation, senior brother Wanyan immediately sensed that things were not good. Instantly, this demon could no longer be bothered with conserving his magic power. He formed a seal with his hands, and his magic power surged towards the blood blade, pouring furiously into the bloody light. Instantly, the bloody light surged, nearly doubling in size, and silently transformed into a ghostly face. Its huge mouth opened wide, and it rushed downwards, to devour the surnamed youth in the sea of blood. Almost at the same time, the surrounding blood mist also surged and churned. Wave after wave of huge blood waves formed a blood-colored vortex, instantly trapping the surnamed youth tightly, leaving him with no way to escape. The surnamed youth's heart screamed in alarm. He could only suddenly urge them on. The cyan pearl and the silver hook, two treasures, were forcefully struck towards the ghostly face. But a blood-red light flashed from the ghost's mouth. A spray of bloody threads shot out, and in an instant, tightly entangled the two treasures. With a single sweep, it swallowed them into its mouth. The young man surnamed Zhu's face filled with shock. The ghostly face then opened its massive mouth once more. As its fangs were bared, a chilling, sinister laugh echoed out. It suddenly lunged towards the now unprotected area below. A bloody pounce. The young man surnamed Su immediately gritted his teeth. His internal nascent soul's eyes widened as he prepared to break free and escape. Just at that moment, a golden arc of light suddenly appeared, like an immortal descending from the heavens. In a flash, it struck the ghostly face. With a boom, the golden light exploded. The ghostly face let out a miserable scream, instantly scattering by nearly half. But the remaining part became even more ferocious. Just as a look of immense joy appeared on the young man surnamed Zhu's face, it suddenly lunged down and bit into his neck. Layers of blood-red light enveloped him, looking as if it was about to swallow the young man whole in the next moment. The young man surnamed Su felt his body being rapidly corroded by the blood light. In great shock, he hastily chanted a strange incantation. Immediately, his entire broken body suddenly lit up with a layer of yellow light, and in an instant, it exploded. The blood-red light was instantly pierced by countless rays of light, becoming tattered and broken. Then, a several-inch tall nascent soul flashed for a moment, shooting out from within. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in the sky over 100 feet away. Then, its protective spiritual light flashed, and it transformed into a yellow-red streak of light, about to flee. Well said, senior brother. A cold snort escaped his lips. He was seen grabbing fiercely at the empty air. Instantly, a mass of black shit appeared above the nascent soul's head. Then, with a flash of light, it transformed into a hand and grabbed towards the nascent soul. Before the giant hand even descended, the power it contained completely enveloped an area of over 100 feet. Seeing this, the young man surnamed Su felt a bitter pang in his heart. If it were before the ambush, he could naturally have teleported continuously. He could even have relied on the power of his nascent soul itself to forcefully break through this kind of mystical seal. After all, a late-stage cultivator's nascent soul is far beyond what an early or mid-stage cultivator could compare to. Even without a physical body, he would still have the power to fight. But his nascent soul now had already been severely overdrawn back in the sea of blood. How could he possibly have the power to break the opponent's technique? At this moment, Han Li was several dozen yards away, with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression indifferent. It seemed that after unleashing that golden gourd, he had no intention of acting again. With no other choice, the Su youth could only prepare for a desperate struggle. He suddenly mobilized his remaining mana, and from his mouth, he spat out a token of some unknown metal. He was preparing to use his natal treasure for a life or death strike. But just then, a fluorescent light flashed above the jet black hand. A figure bizarrely materialized there. That person raised a hand, and instantly, a clear cry like a dragon's roar echoed out. A green light flashed, and a streak of emerald light, tinged with gold, shot out. Its speed was like a clap of thunder and a flash of lightning. It struck the giant hand formed of black shit in an instant. With a deafening boom and a blinding flash, the giant hand was instantly pierced, leaving a large hole. Under the assault of countless fine arcs of lightning, the giant hand dissolved into black shit and dissipated. The figure in the fluorescent light flickered, and directly crossed the distance of over 10 yards, appearing right next to the Su youth's nascent soul. The Su youth's nascent soul had just escaped death. He was both shocked and overjoyed. Without a second thought, the spiritual light around him flared up, and he turned into a streak of light, fleeing into the distance. Although the figure in the fluorescent light seemed to have saved him, He absolutely did not dare to let his nascent soul linger. That had easily fallen into the hands of others. Fortunately, in the fluorescent light, the figure paid it no mind, merely facing his senior brother and the others in the distance with a cold expression. At that moment, the twilight peacock seemed to have received some command from the young man Su. Its body suddenly trembled, and the feathers of its tail glowed with an exceptional brilliance. The long plumes shot forward with gathered momentum, and then burst apart. A five-colored radiance flared brightly. Its power would startle any beast, causing them to retreat on instinct. The barrier was instantly bathed in the five-colored spiritual light, and immediately began to melt and disintegrate. A massive vertical breach instantly appeared. Seizing the opportunity, the spirit bird flapped its wings furiously. Its body, like a wisp of green smoke, twisted a few times, and then bizarrely appeared outside the barrier. Then, without looking back, it shot straight for the young man Zu's nascent soul. In the blink of an eye, it was right before him. The young man Su was overjoyed. He had his nascent soul fly up without hesitation. The two immediately merged together. An unbelievable scene unfolded. The spirit bird opened its beak, and the young man Zu's nascent soul flew right inside, disappearing from view. Immediately after, with a clear cry, the remaining plumes on the twilight peacock's tail suddenly fanned out wide. At once, a dazzling five-colored spiritual light completely engulfed the spirit bird's body, making it impossible to see at all. At almost the exact same moment, above the battle between the silver-winged Yaksha and Lin Yinping, an aura of black and white energy silently appeared. From within it, Gui Ling's figure emerged. The moment the silver-winged Yaksha saw him, its expression instantly changed. As for Gui Ling, he swept a glance over the demon, his face devoid of expression, made no move at all, but his lips moved slightly as he transmitted a few words. The silver-red, fork-faced being's expression changed slightly. After pondering for a moment, he let out a long sigh. With a sudden wave of both hands, the malevolent soul threads that had been tightly trapping the heavenly blue Saintess flew back in a dense swarm, releasing Lin Yinping, who had been trapped for a long time. Lin Yinping was overjoyed. Just as she was about to fly away, Gui Ling appeared with a cold smile. With a flicker of his body, he suddenly appeared beside the woman. A giant silver axe transformed into a streak of silver light, and struck down in a flash. This took the heavenly blue Saintess completely by surprise. Without a second thought, she activated the silk handkerchief in front of her, trying to block the attack in midair. But in a flash, the phantom of a giant, one-horned tiger appeared on the axe, and lunged downwards. With a sizzling sound, the silk handkerchief was split in two amidst a fluorescent glow. Then, the tiger phantom flickered, and instantly transformed into a cloud of yellow gas, enveloping the woman within it. Lin Yinping was hit by a foul, fishy stench. Realizing something was wrong, her head grew heavy, and she tumbled down. Gui Ling mercilessly formed a hand seal with both hands. Instantly, the yellow gas transformed into a lock, binding the woman tightly. Then, black and white energy swirled, enveloping Lin Yinping and vanishing from the spot in an instant. After a few flashes, they reappeared beside Han Li. Throughout this process, that senior brother didn't lift a finger to stop them. He just watched coldly with a grim expression, saying nothing. And the humanoid puppet in the fluorescent light, once Gui Ling, had retreated, shot over woodenly and landed behind Han Li. Han Li, however, did not glance at the captured heavenly blue Saintess. Instead, she looked towards another direction with a surprised expression. There, a five-colored spiritual light was shining dazzlingly. It had grown to more than double its previous size. Fellow Taoist Han, what is the meaning of this? A voice like rolling thunder boomed out from within the spiritual light. The voice sounded a bit like that young man surnamed Su, but it was much rougher and hoarser, and filled with a sense of wildness. It's nothing. Didn't I, Han, help you rescue fellow Taoist Lin? Han Li's expression didn't change. He replied faintly, in that case, double quotes. It seems I, Su, was overthinking things. The man's voice from within the five-colored spiritual light softened. The spiritual light receded, revealing the spirit rhino peacock. It's just that the spirit creature at this moment was clearly a size larger than before, and on the peacock's head, a milky white face of light had appeared. It was faint, like a phantom image. It had the exact appearance of that young man, Su. However, this face was staring at the unconscious Lin Yinping, a look of unconcealed anxiety on it. Rest assured, I won't do anything to fellow Taoist Lin. However, I have a few things I must ask you first. Fellow Taoist, I trust you won't disappoint me. Han Li asked impassively. Han, are you trying to threaten me? Su, the face formed by the phantom image suddenly darkened, revealing a hint of anger. Threat is too strong a word. Of course. Have you already forgotten? Fellow Taoist, what you promised me just now. Fellow Taoist Lin is here right now, merely to ensure that Brother Su doesn't do anything to break his promise. That's all. Do you really intend to go back on your word? Han Li let out a cold laugh. His expression suddenly turned grim. Even if you want to ask something, you should deal with these few monsters in front of us first. Hearing Han Li say this, the young man surnamed Su finally calmed down. Su Ying's eyes shifted slightly. She said, getting rid of them is a good idea. I was just thinking the same thing. Han Li rubbed his chin, and surprisingly agreed wholeheartedly. Han Li's casual demeanor actually startled the young man surnamed Su. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Han Li smiled faintly, and after giving a command to Gui Ling, he immediately, accompanied by the humanoid puppets, flew out side by side. When they reached the vicinity of the Sea of Blood, the two of them came to a halt. Han Li stared at the 10,000-year corpse bear for a moment, then said lightly, Fellow Taoist, as the master of the 10,000 demon bones, I presume you have other important matters to attend to here at Mount Kunwu. These two are still of use to me, so I'll be taking them with me for now. I trust you have no objections. Fellow Taoist. Although his words were framed as a discussion, Han Li's tone was exceptionally forceful. This made the silver-red yaksha and the corpse-seating beast on the other side furious upon hearing it. Fellow Taoist, you are Han Li, a cultivator from Tianlan. Correct. The corpse bear, who hadn't spoken a word until now, actually spoke up and asked a somewhat inexplicable question. Han Li was taken aback at first, but then his eyes narrowed lazily. With a nonchalant expression, he said, Not bad. Why, could it be that you, fellow Taoist, plan to seek revenge on me in Tianlan later? Revenge? I have no interest. You saved these two from Tianlan this time. I can turn a blind eye and let it go. But only this once. If you interfere again next time, and ruin the plans of our 10,000 demon bones, things won't be this easy. Even if you have the help of these two, you will never make it back to Tianlan alive. A green light flashed in the 10,000-year corpse bear's eyes, but he immediately returned to normal and said, when Han Li heard this, the corner of his mouth twitched, but he just gave a faint smile and said nothing more. Senior brother Wan Nian, however, suddenly formed a hand seal, and then let out a sharp cry. The distant bloody light immediately began to flash rapidly. After all the bloody lights swirled in the air, it transformed into a giant, blood-colored blade. After spinning rapidly, it plunged straight into the sea of blood below. A hazy, bloody spiritual light shot straight up to the heavens. On the giant appeared the ghost face that had been scattered by Han Li's earlier attack. It let out a sinister grin and opened its massive mouth. The sea of blood below instantly transformed into a pillar of blood, which was completely swallowed into its mouth. In the blink of an eye, it was completely absorbed by the giant. The bloody giant looked no different than before, but the stench of blood was so foul it made one want to vomit. It was incredibly pungent. Then, with a signal from senior brother Wan Nian, the silver-winged yaksha and the corpse bird beast at his side flew straight towards the palace without a word. Then, after a flash, the three streaks of light brazenly entered it and disappeared from sight. This senior brother, it seems, has another purpose for being here. I just don't know how this demon convinced Yan Qi and the other yaksha demon to follow his lead. And it seems there's something else going on inside this palace as well. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly, the light within them flickering uncertainly. All right, now, Brother Su, you can answer my question, can't you? Han Li silently turned his head and calmly faced the lynxy peacock behind him. He asked, What does Brother Han wish to ask? The face on the peacock glanced at the humanoid puppet and at the one lying on the turtle spirit, Lin Yinping, who was in its hands. After a brief hesitation, they could only say with a bitter smile,